Okay, welcome back. So now that we know what the capacity constraint is on the system, let's bring it back to the case question, which is how should Shouldice expand, right? And one of the proposals on the table was to have our surgeons perform surgeries on the weekends also, right? So if we have them perform surgeries on the weekends, I'm going to change this 5. Let's just say Saturday surgery, not even Sunday surgery. Let's just say Saturday surgery. I'm going to change that to 6, right? Which means now the surgeons can perform up to 216 surgeries a week. Now, let me ask you this. If the surgeons are performing surgery 6 days a week, does throughput or flow of patients through Shouldice in any given week increase? Pause the video and think about it for a little bit and come back when you're ready. Welcome back. So by changing the policy of weekday only surgeries to weekday plus Saturday, I changed this number to 6, right? And notice this number, this 180, changes to 216, right? So the capacity of the doctors goes up 216, but the capacity, right? The capacity of the entire patient process remains the same as 180. So I'm gonna bold this and I'm gonna make it yellow, right? And stare at that number because I'm gonna change this back. So 5 days a week of surgery, 6 days a week of surgery. Notice that this 178 does not change. And this 178 capacity of Shouldice doesn't change because the bottleneck is not the surgeons. The bottleneck is the number of hospital beds. So it doesn't matter whether we ask our surgeons to do surgeries on Saturdays or not. We won't be able to accommodate more patients because the number of hospital beds is actually the constraint. So in terms of growth strategies, asking our surgeons to conduct surgeries on Saturdays does not make sense unless we increase the capacity on the hospital beds, right? So now let me zoom in a little bit and let's play around with the hospital bed side of things, right? So one of the proposals on the table was to increase a 5th floor to the hospital, right? So let's just say that increasing the capacity on the 5th floor was going to increase total hospital bed capacity by 50%. So equals, I'm going to delete that, equals that times 150%. Okay, so now we'll have 134 beds. If we run them 7 days a week, then all of a sudden the capacity on the hospital beds is 267. And our capacity constraint, sorry, let me lower this back to 5. Our capacity constraint has now shifted to the doctors. So if we expand to a 5th floor and add on additional rooms, right, and increase our capacity to 134 beds, then notice that our capacity constraint is now the number of surgeries that our doctors can perform. So after we increase the number of hospital beds, then yes, we would need to ask our doctors to perform surgeries on Saturdays also. So the moment that we ask our doctors to perform surgeries on Saturdays, right, then the number of surgeries per day per week, say, is now going to be 6. Okay. And our doctors would continue to be the bottleneck in this scenario. So in conclusion, it's useless to ask our doctors to perform surgeries on Saturday unless we increase the bed count or increase the number of patients who can stay on the hospital side. Now, let me zoom in again. Let me go back to 5 hours. 5 days a week. Okay. And let's say we don't increase the number of hospital beds. Let's say it's still 89. What if instead of an average of 3.5 nights stay, so some guests staying 3 nights, some guests staying 4 nights, we kick everybody out after their 3rd night? Okay. So we change the way that we do things, and all of a sudden our patients, or we reduce capability variability on our patient side so that they're even healthier and they only need to stay 3 nights. We don't have cases where they need to stay 4 nights. So this drops down to 3. If we can get the average stay length down to 3, right, nights instead of 3.5 nights, then similar, right, to increasing the number of beds, we've actually, increased the capacity of the hospital beds because we're turning over those beds faster. So think of inside a restaurant, right? Changing this cell would mean adding more tables and chairs into the restaurant, right? Changing this cell just means we get people to eat and leave faster. So we turn the table over faster. In this case, we're turning the beds over faster, right? So either way, we can accommodate more. In the case of the restaurant, we can accommodate more customers. Or in the case of Shouldice, we can accommodate more patients. And if we can reduce the average length of stay to 3 nights, then all of a sudden the capacity constraint, the bottleneck of the Shouldice experience shifts back to surgeons because our surgeons are only able to do 180 surgeries a week, right? So if we can lower the average length of stay to 3 nights, then we can ask our doctors to perform surgeries on Saturdays, and then we can kind of up the number of patients that we go ahead and see. So this is a good way to think about the growth options that is presented inside the case.